This part of the training covers single-row functions. Single-row functions return a value. Single-row functions are statements. Single-row functions do not maintain state. Single-row functions compute and forget any immediate computation state after the computation returns. But, however, note that the sole exception is the special prior function, which is stateful. We review the most important functions here. Please see the documentation for a complete list. Single-row functions can easily be added by an application. Use an aggregation function instead if you need to keep track of or share, for example, the count, the sum, or a more complex state. This slide and the next slide discuss the case expression. The case expression returns a value on a specified condition. The case expression has two forms. Case value, when, which acts like a switch. Case when, condition, then, which acts as an if-then else. The switch form syntax is as follows. Case value. When compare value then result. Optionally, when compare value then result. Optionally, else result. End. The switch form syntax returns the result where the value equals compare value. For instance, this EPL returns the text expense account for account ID 001 and returns the text regular account for all other account IDs. Select case account ID. When quotes 001 then quotes expense account. Else quotes regular account. End. As account, category. From withdrawal. The if-then-else form of case is case. When condition then result. Optionally, when condition then result. Optionally, else result. End. This form returns the result for the first condition that is true. For example, this EPL also returns the text expense account for account ID 001 and returns the text regular account for all other accounts. Select case. When account ID equals quotes 001 then quotes expense account. Else quotes regular account. End. As account, category. From withdrawal. The cast single-row function is for type conversion. Cast converts between value types. The syntax is cast parenthesis expression comma type name. An additional parameter can define a date format for use with dates and timestamps. Cast has the following functions. Cast can typecast, also known as downcasting. For example, when using dynamic properties. Assume that withdrawal events can have a TXN text property but that property is not currently in the schema. The dynamic property, which has a question mark, returns an object type value. Dynamic properties had been discussed earlier. This example typecasts the value to a string type value. Select cast parenthesis TXN text question mark, comma string. As TXN, text, string. From withdrawal. Another function of cast is type widening and type conversion. This example, assuming amount is a double type value, returns a big decimal. Select cast parenthesis amount, comma big decimal. From withdrawal. Another function of cast is parsing date or time formatted strings. Note, cast does not convert between event types. The insert into clause can convert between event types. This slide and the next two slides are about a single row function that returns previous Values. The previous family of functions is for data window navigation. All previous functions require that a data window is defined. The compiler does not allow queries with a previous function and without a data window. The previous functions return values or events according to the sort order implied by the data window definition. When used with data windows that don't have a sort order, the previous functions return values or events according to the arrival order. When used with a sorted data window, the previous functions return values or events according to the sort criteria. When data windows are grouped, the previous function operates within the group assigned to the currently arriving event. The previous functions are in this table. Prev. Parenthesis. Index. Comma value. Returns the value or the event at the position starting from the newest event, or top, at the index. Provtail. Parenthesis. Index. Comma value. Returns the value or the event at the position starting from the oldest event, or bottom, at the index. Provwindow. Parenthesis value. Returns the data window contents according to sort order. Provcount. Parenthesis value. Returns the count of events. The index expression must return an integer type value and is an offset, starting at 0. The value expression can be a tag name of the event or an event property name. The functions return null when the data window is empty or when previous rows don't exist, uses null to compare. This example demonstrates the previous functions. Select W as current, withdrawal. Prev parenthesis 1 W as at index 1. Prev parenthesis 2 W as at index 2. Prevcount parenthesis W as CNT. Prevwindow parenthesis W as win. From withdrawal. At length parenthesis 3. As W. The table below is the output for a scenario of withdrawal events arriving. A withdrawal event arrives, labeled as W1. The current withdrawal column is W1, the at index 1 is null, the at index 2 is null, the CNT is 1, the win is W1. A withdrawal event arrives, labeled as W2. The current withdrawal column is W2, the at index 1 is W1, the at index 2 is null, the CNT is 2, the win is W2 and W1. A withdrawal event arrives, labeled as W3. The current withdrawal column is W3, the at index 1 is W2, the at index 2 is W1, the CNT is 3, the win is W3, W2 and W1. A withdrawal event arrives, labeled as W4. The current withdrawal column is W4, the at index 1 is W3, the at index 2 is W2, the CNT is 3, the win is W4, W3 and W2. The prior single row function returns prior events or values. The prior function is the only stateful single row function. The prior function does not require that a data window is defined, and it may retain events that are not also retained in a data window if defined. The syntax is prior parenthesis index comma value. The index expression must return an integer type value and is an offset, starting at 0. The value expression can be a tag name of the event or an event property name. The function returns null when there is no prior event, uses null to compare. This example demonstrates the prior function. Select W as current, withdrawal. Prior parenthesis 1 W as at index 1. Prior parenthesis 2 W as at index 2. From withdrawal. As W. The table below is the output for a scenario of withdrawal events arriving. A withdrawal event arrives, labeled as W1. The current withdrawal column is W1, the at index 1 is null, the at index 2 is null. A withdrawal event arrives, labeled as W2. The current withdrawal column is W2, the at index 1 is W1, the at index 2 is null. A withdrawal event arrives, labeled as W3. The current withdrawal column is W3, the at index 1 is W2, the at index 2 is W1. A withdrawal event arrives, labeled as W4. The current withdrawal column is W4, the at index 1 is W3, the at index 2 is W2. The current underscore timestamp function returns the runtime current time in a long type value of milliseconds since epoch. See the Programming Interfaces section of the training on epoch, controlling time in microseconds. This example query and scenario selects and advances current runtime time. Select current underscore timestamp.format. Quotes yyyyy.mm.dd. As t. From withdrawal. The scenario is D equals quotes 2010-6-1000:00:00.00. This sets the time to June 10, 2010 at 0 hours and 0 minutes and 0 seconds and 0 microseconds. A withdrawal event arrives, labeled as W1. The column T has the value of June 10, 2010 at 0 hours. D equals D plus parenthesis 1 hour 2 minutes 30 seconds 40 milliseconds. This advances the time by 1 hour 2 minutes 30 seconds 40 milliseconds. A withdrawal event arrives, labeled as W2. The column T has the time portion set to hour 1, minute 2, second 30 and milliseconds 40. An application can add user-defined functions that are single-row functions. We don't show a full programming interface example here. For instance, for this EPL, assume the distance and map events functions were added. Select distance. Parenthesis x, y, z. From location, event. Select map events. Parenthesis E1, E2. From pattern. Brackets every E1 equals E1. Followed by E2 equals E2.